What's the creepiest, scariest thing you've seen but no one believes you? Didn't see it but heard it. My friends and I got a cheap set of walkie-talkies from Walmart and were playing around with them in the middle of the day. There's a bit of silence as we're trying to figure out the volume, and out of nowhere there's a male voice saying "Mayday, Mayday, Mayday" that comes through all of our walkie-talkies, and it definitely sounds like it from one of those aircraft headsets. We try to answer back but there's no response. I called non-emergency but they said there weren't any reports of distressed aircraft or ships, and even if there were, they couldn't do anything about it. Alternatively, a couple months later I saw a plane with an engine on fire go over my campus, but apparently no one else did. When I was 7 or 8, I would have a reoccurring nightmare that one of my dolls came to life, played with me, and then would try to pull me into my closet with her. I'd follow her into the closet at first, but then she'd show me this little door at the back of the closet, and my heart would start to race. I don't know what it was about that door, but I knew something bad would happen if I went through it. I'd start to struggle and try to pull away, but the doll was too strong and would start pulling me through the door. At this point in the dream, I'd always wake up screaming. The worst part was I had night terrors, so sometimes I'd wake up standing next to my closet. Every night before bed, I'd make my parents make sure there wasn't a little door at the back of my closet. There never was. Anyway, I was talking to my mum the other day and this dream came up. I'm laughing about it and how ridiculously paranoid I was about dolls in that closet, but my mom gets really quiet. She tells me the creepy part of that dream wasn't the doll. It was the fact that there used to be a little door at the back of the closet, but when I was 1 year old, they remodeled the house and put a wall where the door used to be. There's no way I could have remembered that door, but years later, I kept dreaming about it. None of my friends believe this story, but I swear it's true. Growing up, I had a friend named Adam. He was never able to come out during the day, only right before all of us kids had to go home for the evening. Adam lived a few houses over, in a house with an overgrown yard. I met his parents once. They were very strange, didn't smile, and obviously didn't want me there. I remember Adam telling me that he was sick. That's why he couldn't play that much. He was a small boy, pale with dark hair. Eventually, Adam stopped showing up altogether. And I eventually moved on, though I do remember going to his house a couple times to see if he could come play, and his dad just gave me this look before closing the door in my face. Later in life, I asked my sister if she remembered him. She doesn't, and according to my parents, that house was empty the entire time we lived there. I don't know who Adam was. I don't know why I so vividly remember him and his parents. As far as I can tell, he wasn't real, and yet I have perfect memories of him and his parents. I grew up on a 2-acre home with plenty of trees and room for an 8-year-old to run around. Our house also was heated in winter by a wood fireplace, so we would periodically cut down one of our own trees to save money. Well, for about 2 years, there was a stump less than a foot tall near the house, and at least once a day, without fail, I would see someone standing on the stump. Usually it was out of the corner of my eye, but once or twice I looked directly at him. I always looked away quickly, 'cause it startled me and he was gone. But my sister says she experienced the same thing. Nothing ever came of it though. This happened to me last year and I fully understand why no one believed me, because it sounds ridiculous. Every morning, I need to wake up at 5 a.m. to get the 5:30 bus to the train station to go to university. I had to be there by 8 a.m., but I like to get there half an hour early. To get to the bus stop, I have to walk down this bike path and under this bridge to get to this quiet backstreet road. There is fuck all light on the bike path. This street is dead quiet. The right side of the road is a continuation of the bike path, and the left is a normal footpath with a long green hedge. One morning, I was standing there waiting for a bus and this old woman comes walking out from under the bridge. I didn't see her at first because, as I said, it was pitch black on the bike path. She crosses the road and walks up to me. She asked me if I knew where X Road was. I turned to point in the direction of the road she was looking for. I turned back and she was gone. This old woman who was walking at a snail's pace disappeared within 3 seconds. Just after high school, maybe 6 months or so after 9/11, I was a van driver who drove the Meals for Meals on Wheels to the place where they get packaged up and taken for home delivery. Anyway, the delivery van only had AM/FM radio and I was listening to 92.5 FM, when all of a sudden the station cuts out and a transmission that I can only describe as an American version of a numbers station began playing. It was seemingly random numbers followed by a long period of the same phrase repeated over and over again. The phrase was "they took the crosstown bus," over and over again. None of the other drivers heard it, but man was it creepy to hear. Eventually the regular radio station came back on and they never mentioned anything about it. This was 4 years ago. As I was walking on the sidewalk on a busy afternoon, I saw a suspicious man about 18 yo. He was 10 meters away and walking what it looked like towards me. I kept my eyes on him despite the fact that he wasn't looking directly at me. His eyes were roaming, jumping from an object to an object. As we approached one another, half a meter away from each other, he takes out a knife and tries to stab me in my left side. He wasn't really fast, so I easily dodged it and immediately turned to see who is he, or if he is trying to stab me again. To my surprise, he continues walking and after a couple of meters he stops, turns around, smiles and gives me thumbs up. Then he continues walking in the opposite direction. Till this day I don't know who he was, what he wanted, and even my family doesn't believe me, because if someone wanted to stab you, you can't stop him. You aren't experienced enough to dodge it like that, and something of that kind. I woke up to something. It sounded like a door shutting. At first I thought it was a dream because I could hear it in the dream as I was waking up. Kinda like when someone calls your name when you're dreaming. But then I looked at my cat. His hair was completely standing up and he was beaming at my bedroom door. This was the moment when I got really scared. BC, I know animals can pick up on that shit and I thought he might know something's wrong. My cat doesn't do this type of thing unless a dog is in the room. So I looked over at the door and the only way I can describe it is it looked like it was swaying, slowly, like it was breathing, like someone was standing on the other side of it trying to hear if I was awake. This swaying was accompanied by a shadow. I don't mean a supernatural shadow, but it looked like the shadow of a person behind the door. I was paralyzed in fear. I lied there for 5 minutes naked watching this door away. I considered yelling and trying to scare them away, but I was terrified someone might respond. I legitimately thought this was the moment where I will have to defend myself or be killed. I don't own a gun, but after 10 minutes or so I mustered up the courage to check every room in the house. I fucking checked every corner too. But there was no one there. I don't know what happened, but my evolutionary traits kicked in and I completely believed someone was outside my door. I spent one summer in high school living with my aunt and uncle and keeping their 7-year-old daughter for them during the day while they worked. I was up late one night watching TV in the living room. The living room was right off of the kitchen, separated only by an L-shaped bar. I saw my cousin, out of the corner of my eye, walk down the hallway from her room into the kitchen. It was way past her bedtime, so I told her she needed to go back to bed. When I didn't hear her answer, I got up and walked around the bar and into the kitchen. There was no one there. I checked under the bar to see if she was hiding from me, and there was no one there, and nowhere else she could have gone from the kitchen. I walked down the hallway to her room, and she was fast asleep, snoring, so there was no way it was her. It baffled me, and freaked me out, because if I didn't see my cousin, who was the little girl that walked into the kitchen, Several years later, I was talking to my aunt and she nonchalantly brings up the ghost in her house. I laughed it off and she said, "No, I'm serious. We have a ghost. Your uncle and I both have seen her and heard her. We call her Giggles, because we hear her giggling. We usually only see her in the hallway before she disappears." All of a sudden, I remembered the disappearing girl in the kitchen. I asked her what her ghost looked like. She said she had blonde hair with braids and wore a white dress. My cousin is blonde. On the night in question, I thought I'd seen my cousin in a nightgown walk down the hallway, but apparently it was the ghost that resides in my aunt's house. Fishing on Lake Minnewanka in Banff National Park with a good friend. About 50 feet from shore. Around 8:30 p.m. I see glowing red eyes. Up in the trees. Like red. Like Predator, I guess. I do a double take. They are gone. I decide not to say anything. Maybe I'm tripping. Did just smoke up? Nope. 5 minutes later my buddy says I just seen some glowing red eyes up in the top of those trees. I feel goosebumps. Yup, I saw them too. We look back and they are gone. We decide to aim the boat towards the shoreline. It's not dark yet but sun is going down. We saw nothing. No owls. No goats in the trails. We didn't get off the boat but we had a good look around. When I ask him about it, this was around 10 years ago, he just says he doesn't want to talk about it. I can't blame him. But after all these years I've never heard or seen anything like those glowing red eyes, 30 to 40 feet up in the trees, staring at us. I copied and pasted this next part. I knew nothing about the history when we went fishing there. For more than 100 centuries, people hunted and camped along the original shores of Lake Minnewanka. The Stony people called it Minnesota-Waukee or Lake of the Spirits. They respected and feared this lake for its resident spirits. The early Europeans called it Devil's Lake. I used to go camping there. I do not anymore. Mostly because it's bear country for most of the summer. But yeah, also because of those bright red eyes. I will never forget that. Most surreal thing I've ever seen that. I am absolutely positive that there was a homeless person living in our basement when I was a teenager. I went down to get my laundry out of the dryer one day and there was a sheet laying flat on the floor with a bunch of dirty clothes piled to one side like a pillow. I didn't see anyone, but all of the hair was standing up on the back of my neck and it just felt like someone was watching me. I ran up the stairs so fast. I told my dad, but he just wouldn't believe me. Few years ago I was using my laptop near my window when I thought I saw something through the blinds. I moved the blinds to get a better look and I saw a grown man with his face almost touching the glass looking at me. I didn't live in the best area and he was obviously up to no good. As soon as he saw me he took off running. Took me a while to get comfortable near that window again. So I'm in the car, parked, with my boyfriend and best friend. There's lots of birds around. I'm looking out the window and suddenly a big black bird flies up at the passenger window where I am, smacks into it, then flies up on the roof and starts flapping and pecking and making a ton of noise. I freak out and start yelling, "Did y'all see that fucking bird? That was so scary," and they both were like, "No." They both claimed to not have seen it or heard it. Whack. So when I was in high school, I lived on the basement level of our house. It had a little apartment down there with a kitchen, bathroom, etc. This made my place the natural hangout spot for my circle of friends. One week, my parents went out of town. It was after school one day when 4 or 5 of my friends and I were hanging out downstairs in the basement. We were just hanging out, laughing, shooting the shit ... when all of us heard distinct footsteps from above. No one else was home and my parents weren't due to return for several days. But this was very much the distinct sound of human footsteps going down the hallway. Every single one of my friends heard it. It sounded so much like a person walking that we all grabbed something to defend ourselves, and went up the stairs to investigate. We didn't find anyone or anything up there. Another time when my parents were out of town, a friend of mine was staying over for the weekend. I had to get up early to go to work, but I let my friend sleep in since I would be back in a few hours. I told him I was leaving, walked up the steps, and locked the door behind me. When I came home from work, my friend was awake. He asked me what I had forgotten that morning. I told him I wasn't exactly sure what he was talking about. He told me 10 minutes after I left, he heard someone running down the hallway upstairs. I told him I hadn't come back at all. He never stayed over after that.